Escaped North Korea with $0, gives Silicon Valley millionaire. In a small, forgotten village in North Korea, a young boy named Jin-woo stared at the stars. To him, they weren't just distant lights, they were symbols of a world he could only dream of. His world was one of endless gray uniforms, gray buildings, and the gray, gnawing hunger in his belly. His father, a quiet man with eyes that held a universe of unspoken sorrow, once whispered stories of a place called America, a land where the stars weren't just for dreaming, but for reaching. That whisper planted a seed of impossible hope in Jin-woo's heart. One night, the whispers turned to action. His father, with a grim determination, woke him. "It's time," he said, his voice barely audible. They moved like shadows through the sleeping village, every rustle of leaves, every dog's bark, a potential death sentence. They reached the Tumen River, a dark, icy serpent separating them from China, from freedom. His father pushed a small, waterproof bundle into his hands. "Go? Don't look back. Survive." Those were the last words Jin-woo ever heard from him. He plunged into the freezing water, the current pulling him, the sounds of shouting and gunfire echoing behind him. He didn't dare look back. Swam. His father's final words, a mantra against the biting cold. He made it across, half frozen and utterly alone, with nothing but the clothes on his back and the burning memory of his father's sacrifice. China was not the promised land. It was a place of fear, of hiding, of being constantly on the run. He worked odd jobs in the shadows, washing dishes in dingy restaurants, hauling crates in bustling markets, always looking over his shoulder. Every penny he earned was a step further away from the river. He learned Mandarin not in a classroom, but on the streets, his survival depending on his ability to blend in. For 2 years, he was a ghost, saving every coin until he could pay a broker's shady figure who promised a perilous journey to South Korea. The journey was a blur of cramped truck beds, suffocating ship containers, and constant terror. But he made it. Stepping onto South Korean soil felt like being born again. He was no longer a ghost. He had a name, an identity. The South Korean government provided basic support, and for the first time, he saw a computer. It was a clunky old desktop in a community center, but to Jin-woo, it was a portal to another universe. He became obsessed. While other defectors struggled to adapt, Jin-woo poured every waking hour into learning. He devoured free online courses teaching himself to code. Python, Java, C++, the languages of this new world flowed into his mind, replacing the language of fear and survival. He excelled, earning a scholarship to a university in Seoul, where he studied computer science. He was brilliant, but he was also an outsider. His accent, his past, the haunted look that never quite left his eyes set him apart. He felt the weight of expectation, the need to prove that his father's sacrifice wasn't in vain. He graduated at the top of his class. But his ambition was bigger than Seoul. He remembered his father's stories of America, the land of limitless possibilities. He applied to every tech company he could in Silicon Valley, sending out hundreds of resumes. He got hundreds of rejections. But it only took one yes. A small, ambitious startup saw the fire in his cover letter and offered him an internship. With a small loan and a heart full of trepidation and hope, he boarded a plane to San Francisco. He arrived with less than $100, sleeping on a friend's couch. Silicon Valley was a world of casual wealth, audacious ideas, and relentless competition. He felt like a ghost again, an imposter surrounded by the privileged children of a world he never knew. He was mocked for his accent, for his simple clothes, for his quiet intensity. He worked twice as hard as everyone else, fueled by black coffee and the memory of the freezing Tumen River. He wasn't just coding, he was solving problems. He saw inefficiencies others missed. He built solutions others hadn't thought of. One evening, while working late on a frustrating data processing issue, he had a flash of inspiration. He thought about the complex, informal networks people use to survive and share information back in North Korea. What if he could apply that logic to data? What if he could create a system that mimicked that organic, decentralized flow of information? He spent the next 6 months in a creative frenzy, sleeping under his desk, his mind on fire. He built a new kind of data compression algorithm, one that was faster and more efficient than anything on the market. It was revolutionary. He showed his prototype to his boss, who dismissed it. He showed it to senior engineers who couldn't see its potential. They saw a quiet intern, not a visionary. Dejected but not defeated, Jinwoo decided to bet on himself. He quit his internship, using the last of his savings to rent a tiny office-converted garage that reminded him of the hidden spaces where he used to sleep in China. He refined his algorithm, built a company around it, and named it Jael, the Korean word for texture or grain, representing the fine details he could now process. He pitched to venture capitalists. Door after door was slammed in his face. They saw a North Korean defector with a thick accent and an unproven idea. They didn't see the grit forged in starvation, the resilience born from a desperate river crossing. One investor, however, a woman who had immigrated as a child herself, saw something familiar in his eyes. She saw the unwavering belief. She gave him his first check. That one yes was all it took. With funding, Jael exploded. His technology was a game changer, and soon the biggest tech giants in the world were knocking on his door. The same companies that had rejected his resume were now offering billions to acquire his company. But Jinwoo remembered the dismissive faces, the closed doors. He refused their offers. He would build his own legacy. Jael went public, and on the day of the IPO, Jinwoo, the boy who escaped with nothing, became a billionaire. He stood on the balcony of his Silicon Valley home, looking at the same stars he had watched as a child. They no longer seemed so distant. But the wealth, the success he'd felt hollow. He thought of his father, of the life he never got to live. What was the point of all this if it was just for him? That night, he made a decision. He established the Chosen Star Foundation, named for the stars of his homeland. Its mission, to fund underground networks that provide education and technology to the people of North Korea. He used his cutting-edge technology, not for profit, but to create secure, untraceable communication channels, smuggling in tablets loaded with encyclopedias, coding tutorials, and stories from the outside world. He became a new kind of ghost, working from the shadows to give others the one thing that had saved him: knowledge. He knew the risks. He knew the regime would see him as an enemy. But he was no longer the scared boy at the river's edge. His father told him to survive. But Jinwoo learned that survival wasn't enough. True freedom wasn't about escaping a place. It was about having the power to change it. He was now reaching back across the river, not with his hands, but with ideas, planting seeds of hope in the minds of a new generation, hoping that one day they wouldn't have to escape to see the stars. They could reach for them from their own homes. Thanks for watching. If you were inspired by this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified of our next video.